And Tarcísio, so far, I don't consider him someone from the right. He's from the far right. He's the guy who puts on a Trump hat and says, right? And not great day, right?
Exactly.
And who puts in charge of the police someone who says that a good cop should have at least 5 or 6 murders under his belt?
On their resume, otherwise they don't deserve respect.
That horrible thing Behit said, who is a congressman, right?
Exactly.
This is the fascist-like trait of Tarcísio de Freitas, who is not moderate at all.
Yes, I agree. I agree.
Wing.
So that's why I think that now these people can become autonomous in relation to, if Bolsonaro wants a family's political project, first and foremost, it's a family project, right? By the way, Bolsonaro himself actually has a god.
Family.
Yeah, his family. He created a family political enterprise, right? I mean, at the time, right, he was a federal deputy running for president. One of his sons was a federal deputy. Another was a state deputy in Rio running for the Senate. And another was a city councilor, right, in Rio de Janeiro. Today, the youngest one is also a city councilor over there in Santa Catarina. And now wanting to run for federal office. The ex-wife, who was a city councilor in Rio, right, was removed by her own son, also running for congresswoman. So actually, that's why Bolsonaro was never an outsider, right? But he's not exactly a typical insider either. He was a politician there, a kind of lone wolf in the middle of it all. But he had a family political project.
He had his own charisma. Now, as for ignorance, it was abysmal, right? A real lack of knowledge.
I don't know
Information that I made
about that, right? Because it's good to be ignorant for Bolsonarism, right? And he made that very clear. And in his case, what matters at this moment is to maintain this hegemony. So he puts his son forward and won't accept any other leader as someone who could succeed him. Now, if Flávio loses this election, right? Depending on the scenario, I would say there is room to be filled by other groups there.
Yeah, if Flávio loses the election, right? Yeah, if Flávio loses the election, possibly Bolsonaro won't mean much anymore in the next election.
I believe so.
Which are other leaders,
declines.
including from the far right and the right as well, will emerge.
Yes, that's it. They've already emerged.
Because he doesn't have it. He's under house arrest, confined at home. The other one, his son Eduardo, is out of the country, right? The other day I saw him shopping, man. Did you see him buying rifles? He bought an arsenal of rifles in the United States, in the store, buying and showing off the rifles, signaling that we are arming ourselves. And in this video, he shows up with rifles, right? There's also an image of him or Flávio with the secretary, obviously. Yeah, like someone signaling, just getting ready to take over. The weapons, yeah.
By force.
I don't know, people are crazy enough to think it's possible.
But then you have Flávio, Eduardo, who can't be a candidate.
Who can't even set foot here. Flávio, if he loses the election, is also out of political life for now. His term as senator is over, right? Carlos Bolsonaro, wants to run as a candidate in Santa Catarina, and he's going to run for the Senate. He's going to face a tough challenge there.
Which is Amin.
Amin and Congresswoman Carol de Tone.
Who is from his own party.
He could lose.
And he's the outsider, right? He's perceived that way.
Santa Catarina has been pretty radicalized to the right?
Yes, but there are the local options, right? You don't need to get an imported one from Rio de Janeiro. And there's something kind of curious about that, right? Because in the end, with Flávio running for president, if Carlos Bolsonaro had stayed in Rio de Janeiro, he would have replaced his brother in that candidacy. By going to Santa Catarina, he gets into a contested situation and leaves that space vacant in Rio de Janeiro to be filled by others, right? There's a historical irony there.
All of this mixed together. But I want to go back and ask you about the armed forces.
Yes.
They didn't act, right? They didn't respond to the dog whistle for a coup. Not in 1922, nor on January 8th, right? The head of the Air Force was relaxed, right? And now, this time, from the history you know of this country, do you think the military has changed in any way in their training to embrace the defense of democracy? Because they never were, right?
I don't think there was even time for that, right? Of course, today you have the army commander in particular who seems to be someone more committed to a certain respect for the rule of law, right? He has shown some signs in that direction over time. Yeah, and not by chance. And sometimes what really matters is, above all, who attacks you, right? It's no coincidence he was heavily attacked by all those involved in the coup. There are recordings, there are written records clearly showing that. But during this period, we haven't seen any kind of change in behavior or in the curriculum of military schools in terms of training the military in a different way. It doesn't seem to me that anything is underway in that direction. So I think that even though there's a certain silence, and I think there's some merit in that, right? Particularly from the army commander, in avoiding any kind of confusion or noise. There wasn't, like there was in the past, that celebration of March 31st, right? Of the 1964 coup. And this happened repeatedly over the years. This time, no. So there are some positive signs in this area, but structurally, nothing has changed. So we still have exactly the same armed forces. The fact is that these same armed forces, at least some of their leaders, refused to go along with the coup attempt in 2022.
Maybe because they didn't have
2023.
support, like I said.
Maybe, right? I think it's quite possible that this happened.
Of course, I'm not saying all of them. Some commanders certainly wouldn't get involved in this situation.
Right?
Dictatorial.
So, of course. Claro. And if this served as any kind of lesson, right, these punishments, right, all the embarrassment it caused the armed forces, this failed coup attempt, maybe the military will start, maybe we're at the beginning. I think that's the point, the beginning of a process, of a certain retreat by the military, where they really should be, which is in the barracks, right, performing tasks that the nation delegates to them that actually have to do with their mission, right, which is to protect the borders, to do with...
And they have been well attended to by President Lula.
Suas demandas.
Yes, they already had been in the first two governments. They can't complain about that, right? There was an increase in the budget. They were very dissatisfied with the Fernando Henrique government, ironically the son of a military man, but they were treated very well by the Lula government.
Yeah, but there wasn't this structural change.
No.
We don't know what's there. We just know it's there.
Yeah.
And let's remember something else. Yeah, the picture of this military mess in 22 that resulted in the arrest of several high-ranking military officers, right? Oh, I think the picture of this is a crazy captain taking command of the country and becoming commander-in-chief of the armed forces. A captain who was practically expelled from the army. Jair Messias Bolsonaro, right? And this captain, the summary of this is that conversation he had with Sergeant Garcia. No, he doesn't look like Sergeant Garcia, but no. From Zorro, the general makes him hurt, right? Where he says some things. General Pazuello, the general turns to the captain and says, yeah, and the other one is my forehead. I hope this doesn't happen again, right?
Of course, yeah. Unfortunately, not everyone is Sergeant Garcia, right, in these armed forces. And that's one of the expectations we have to see if things don't get too out of hand, right?
Yeah, but we ask, where are those other officers who are staying silent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Last week, was it Sergeants Garcia or those committed to the rule of law?
No, the sergeants. Where are they, right? Because they didn't disappear, right?
No, I don't think they disappeared either.
And last week, my fellow journalist, Bob Fernandez, of course, you should follow Bob, right? Bob was saying that the military clubs are starting to speak out because the military clubs are the places where these retired generals get together, right? And they're always plotting some coup, dreaming up all these crazy ideas. But he said, the military clubs have always been silent, even during the dictatorship, when the military committed crimes against human rights, when they sponsored torture and a lot of corruption, the military clubs remained silent. They were silent. I said, now they only speak out when times bring people like those in '64. General Vernon Walters, an American from the United States, was here orchestrating the coup. Ambassador Lyndon Lincoln Gordon. That's when they speak out. That's what I keep coming back to. I keep insisting on this point. Suddenly, these guys are starting to talk, right? It's probably because they feel like they have friends. There could be new Vernon Walters. There could be new Jim Gordon.
Yeah, Marco Rubio is very clearly someone who goes along those lines, right? Because he's anti-Castro, but he's actually anti-left in general. And it's not just the authoritarian left, it's also the democratic left. Yeah, because deep down we're also talking about a politician from the far right, the ultra-right. It's not just his boss.
And the funny thing is that he's anti-Castro, but his parents left Cuba fleeing from Batista.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a defeated dictator. Fulgencio Batista, exactly.
Ironies, right?
Yeah, but go on, I'll interrupt you.
No, but that's it. Actually, I think they feel a little more maybe at ease because you actually have, the American Secretary of State who has been making repeated statements along those lines. And it's not just him, the Secretary of War, right? Because it's not really defense anymore. Pete Hegseth. Yeah, the Secretary of War, because Trump likes to change these names, who said that Latin America has to be their backyard. And one of the ways to make it their backyard is through this interventionism, right? By preventing governments that are not subservient from being or coming to power. Yeah, so it seems to me that's the point. And then maybe these people get a little bolder because they imagine that if they try some kind of stunt, they might get support. Or even if they don't try, that something will come from outside that goes in that direction. You were saying, Chico, just a little while ago that there might not be recognition of a possible victory by Lula. And I think that's a real risk.
Yes, it is. That he wouldn't accept it. Flavio also doesn't accept defeat. Yes.
Also because the father also didn't accept it. Trump didn't accept his defeat there either because they don't need evidence. They just need to say what they think, right? So the fact that they say there was electoral fraud without proving anything, without showing any kind of evidence that this could have happened, that's not a problem for them. Yeah, the problem is simply believing, telling those who will believe them that things are a certain way. And people go along with it. Right? Well, we see people who drank detergent. We saw people in the United States during Trump's first administration who drank disinfectant. Because Trump said it cured COVID. That happened there too. People who pray or sing the anthem to a tire, right? Who try to attract extraterrestrials with Morse code on their cell phone. So look, these people will believe anything that's told to them. And that's what they rely on to a large extent.
How many are there?
We're talking, according to some studies, about something that could be, let's say, between 2 and 15% of the population.
15% of the voters.
Yeah,
Around
of the
150
voters,
million voters, more or less.
Wait, no, not. 150 million.
Of voters in Brazil.
Around maybe something like 15 to 20 million voters, right?
I'm talking about the 150 million voters Brazil has.
We have.
Yes.
Now,
if it were 10%, it would be 15 million.
Yeah, something like that.
That's crazy. That's a lot of people drinking detergent. Hey, a detergent factory couldn't handle that. No.
You really can't.
And I ask you, I've been feeling this way. I'm not really the type to get scared of these things, right?
But like a little uneasy, you know? I think that, people who are committed to democratic values, to human rights, to social equality,
To sustain growth and development,
we think at this crossroads, what can we do? What do you think journalists, teachers, workers, people who, have the sense that this might be approaching, what should they do? Because from now until Christmas, until the end of the year, even after, but from now until Christmas, a lot is going to happen.
Yeah, look, I think first we need to show what kind of coordination is happening and what its interests are, right? What are they after, right? Who's going to benefit from this, right? And what have they already done in the recent past? Because, look, just to illustrate what I'm trying to say, we used to see, from time to time, people from the far right and other people, I would say, useful innocents in this conversation, saying Brazil with Lula is going to become another Venezuela.
Qualquer falava.
Pois é.
Ano Argentina, 2 anos Venezuela, uma bobagem.
Then we go back in time and say, there was a Lula government for 4 years. There was a Lula government for 2 + 4, 8 years. There was a Dilma government, 12 years. By the start of Dilma's second term, it was 13 and a half years. We didn't even get close to Venezuela. Then there were 4 more years of Lula. We remain light years away from anything like the situation in Venezuela. And they keep saying it. And there are people who keep
still
believing
have
it.
values. Rising economic growth, and care for the environment during those governments.
Now look at the other side. Look at what Trump is doing in the United States. Look at what ICE does. Look at how he deals with universities. Look at how he deals with state governments that are not aligned with him. Right? How he deals with media outlets that don't do his bidding. Let's remember how Bolsonaro treated journalists in Brazil. Right? Let's remember how
Especially
Bolsonaro,
when they were women.
especially when they were women, how did he refer to opposition governors? Let's remember the attempted coup on January 8th. In other words, compare what they did with what others did. If you need more evidence than these people's track record to know what you can expect from them, so showing the risks at this crossroads means looking at these people's track record. What Trumpism does and did, what Bolsonarism does and did, and the fact that they are allied and have worked together. In fact, they go to the United States to conspire against the country, to support actions that harm their own country. So I think that if the press, the scholars, all those who have some ability to communicate with others, simply show what these people did and continue to do, minimally sensible people will understand what this is about. Just show the facts. And I think the facts are very convincing.
You know what I think? For the voter who has this awareness, the voter, the ordinary citizen, it's not enough to vote. He has to work to clarify things.
Their neighbors, their relatives, their acquaintances.
Without fighting, right?
No, it's not about fighting, and it's not about doing this without respect for others.
Because it's about the ability to listen, right?
The ability to listen and not treat the other person like an idiot, right? Sometimes the other person is panicking, they're afraid, they believe in certain things. Just like people fall for scams, right? They give out their bank password, right? They give out their card number.
Sometimes.
People do that in politics too, right? They let themselves be fooled by coup plotters. Even in this case, coup plotters, in more than one sense, right? People who try to deceive others to take advantage of them, and who are also generally trying to undermine democracy. It's kind of the same logic, so you're not going to blame a crime victim for being a crime victim. And many of these people who let themselves be carried away by this kind of siren song are victims of a crime in a way, right? In fact, if it's a coup d'etat, it's definitely a crime, right? But this trickery, this attempt to deceive people, to make them believe in things that don't make sense, right? Things for which, on the contrary, there is evidence that they are actually false.